They thought I would never wake up. They whispered over my hospital bed, signed papers with shaking hands, and decided I was already gone. But here's the thing about the living. We hear more than you think. Stay with me, because when I opened my eyes, I didn't just come back to life. I came back with a plan. My name is Sarah Lawson, and I was 31 years old when my family tried to kill me. The accident happened on a rainy Tuesday night in late October. I had been driving home from work, the world slick with headlights and water, when a truck slid through a red light and tore into the side of my car. They told me later the paramedics thought I wouldn't even survive the ride to the hospital. My skull fractured, ribs shattered, machines breathing for me. The doctors used words like catastrophic and irreversible. By dawn, they were whispering brain dead. I don't remember the crash itself. What I do remember, what still claws at me in the dark hours of the night, are the voices. Faint, muffled, like they were speaking through water. My mother's sobs. My sister's clipped, businesslike tone. A man's voice I didn't recognize at first, until I realized it was my uncle. "Just sign it," he said, his voice low. "She wouldn't want to live like this." And then my sister. "We need to think about the estate. About splitting things before it gets messy." My estate. Splitting things. My chest screamed to move, to rise, to shout. But my body lay cold and motionless, as if I were buried alive in my own skin. The days bled together. Nurses adjusted tubes. Machines beeped. Doctors tapped charts. And always the whispers. Sometimes pity, sometimes calculation. I was supposed to be gone, but I was still there. A ghost in my own body. And then came the day they decided to end me. I remember the doctor's voice. "She meets the criteria. If the family agrees, we can withdraw life support." Silence. Then the scratch of a pen. Something in me snapped. I don't know if it was adrenaline, rage, or sheer terror, but suddenly the dark water I'd been drowning in cracked. My lungs burned. My fingers twitched. My eyes tore open to a world of sterile light and horrified faces. Gasps. Screams. My sister dropping the pen. My mother fainting in the corner. I was alive, and I had heard everything. The weeks that followed were a blur of recovery. My muscles weak, my speech slow, my body alien to me. But my mind, sharper than it had ever been. Because as I learned to walk again, I also learned the truth. The signatures. The documents. The rush to declare me dead. It wasn't mercy. It wasn't grief. It was greed. And what they didn't know, what would become their ruin, was that 3 months before the accident, I had updated my will. I hadn't told a soul, except for one man, my lawyer. When I finally had the strength to lift a phone to my ear, my first call wasn't to my family. It was to him. My lawyer's name was Richard Hale. 58 years old, sharp as glass, and patient in a way that made people underestimate him. The kind of man who never raised his voice because he didn't need to. One sentence from Richard could cut deeper than a courtroom verdict. When I called him, my voice was still weak, rasping from the tube that had lived in my throat. But the moment he answered, all that weakness burned away. "Sarah?" His tone was incredulous, almost reverent. "Good God. I thought. They tried to kill me." The words scraped out like broken glass. "Richard, they signed the papers." I heard them. I heard everything. Silence. A long, weighted silence. Then, "Tell me everything." Slowly. So I did. About the whispers in the hospital room. About the pen scratching on the withdrawal form. About my sister's voice, steady, cold, as she said the word estate. By the time I finished, Richard exhaled so heavily it crackled over the line. "You updated your will in August. You remember what we discussed." I closed my eyes, clutching the phone like a lifeline. "Yes. I left everything to Michael. Michael. My best friend. The one person who had sat by my bed every chance he got, reading to me, playing music, telling me jokes. Even when the doctors insisted I couldn't hear. He had been my constant long before the crash. And 3 months before, when I'd rewritten my will, I decided he would inherit everything. Not my greedy family. Not the vultures waiting to feast. Him. Richard's voice sharpened. "Then we hold the line. No one touches a cent. If your family forged signatures, if they tried to expedite your death, Sarah, that's attempted fraud at best. At worst, it's something darker." I gripped the sheets, my hand trembling. "I want proof." "You'll get it," Richard promised. "But I need you to stay calm. Heal. Let me do the digging." Calm. Heal. Easy words for a man who hadn't been left to rot on a deathbed by his own blood. Because here's what Richard didn't know, what no one knew. The night before the doctor nearly pulled the plug, a nurse had adjusted my ventilator and slipped something small beneath my pillow. I hadn't understood it at first. A tiny black device, humming faintly with power. A recorder. And when I woke up, when my fingers remembered how to move, the first thing I did wasn't cry. It wasn't scream. It was press play. The voices filled my hospital room again. Clear. Unfiltered. My sister. My uncle. My mother. Signing away my life with laughter still in their throats. They thought I had been silenced. But I had their words captured forever. I didn't tell Richard about the recorder. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about justice in a courtroom. This was about revenge. The first time I saw my family after the accident, it felt like walking into my own funeral. 3 weeks after waking, still pale and frail but stronger every day, I asked the hospital to allow visitors. Word spread fast. My mother came first, perfume sharp enough to sting my healing lungs. Behind her, my sister Amanda followed, her heels clicking like gunshots against the tile. My uncle trailed last, his eyes darting, calculating. When they stepped into the room, their faces told a story. My mother's lips trembled, her eyes wet. Amanda wore the same cold mask she'd had at my bedside, the mask of someone already dividing up jewelry in her mind. And my uncle? He looked at me like I was a ghost who'd climbed out of the grave. I let them come closer. Let them circle my bed. And then slowly I smiled. Surprise, I whispered. My mother gasped, clutching her chest. Oh, Sarah. We prayed for this day. Liar. Her prayers had been ink on paper, not words to God. Amanda leaned in, her eyes flicking over the tubes still connected to me. You look better, she said, though her tone made it sound like an accusation. I heard you, I rasped, cutting her off before she could fake sympathy. My voice may have been weak, but the silence that followed was thunderous. Every word, every signature, every plan. Their faces shifted, guilt flickering, masks cracking. My uncle cleared his throat. Sarah, you must have been disoriented. The medication, the coma, you can't be sure. But I was sure. I was more certain than I'd ever been of anything. I know you signed the forms to take me off life support. My gaze moved from one face to the next. I know you thought I'd never wake up. Amanda's lips pressed into a thin line. My mother's tears fell harder, though I couldn't tell if they were real or for show. And then, because I couldn't resist, I leaned back against the pillows and whispered, the thing about the dead, we don't forget what the living do while they think we're gone. The silence that followed was delicious. Thick. Heavy. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a trembling hand. Not now, I said. We'll have plenty of time to talk. Soon. Amanda frowned. What does that mean? I only smiled, because I already had the answer tucked safely under my pillow. Their voices. Their betrayal. Their guilt carved into permanent proof. When they finally left, I could still smell my mother's perfume lingering in the room. It made me nauseous, but it also made me hungry. Hungry to show them what happens when you try to bury someone alive, only to have them crawl out of the grave with teeth sharpened by survival. The day I left the hospital, the air outside tasted different, colder, sharper, alive. For weeks, I'd been trapped under fluorescent lights and the steady rhythm of machines. Now, the city buzzed around me, oblivious to the fact that I had been declared dead and nearly buried by the people who were supposed to love me. Michael was the one who picked me up. His old blue sedan pulled up to the curb, and when he got out, his smile nearly unraveled me. Not the kind of smile my family wore when they wanted something. His was quiet, steady, real. You ready? He asked, opening the passenger door. I slid into the seat, my body still stiff, every movement reminding me how close I'd come to never moving again. More than ready, I whispered. We drove in silence for a while, the radio humming soft static. Finally, Michael glanced at me. They still don't know about the will, do they? I shook my head. Not yet. Richard has the papers locked down tight. But they're circling. Waiting. Michael's jaw tightened. You shouldn't have to face them. I want to face them. My voice was sharper than I intended, but I didn't take it back. They tried to erase me, Michael. They wanted me gone before I even had the chance to fight. No, they don't get to move on like nothing happened. Not this time. I reached into my bag and pulled out the recorder, the same one that had lived under my pillow. My fingers brushed the play button, and once again, Amanda's voice filled the silence. We need to think about the estate. About splitting things before it gets messy. Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Jesus. I let it play a moment longer, then switched it off. Proof, I said. Undeniable proof. They thought I was deaf to it all, but I heard. I recorded. And soon, so will everyone else. Michael's eyes flicked to mine, his voice low. So what's the plan? I smiled, a thin, dangerous curve of lips I barely recognized as my own. Step 1, let them see me. Not as the weak patient they tried to bury, but walking. Breathing. Alive. Step 2, make them think they've won anyway. Let them circle tighter around what they think is theirs. And step 3, burn it all down, Michael finished softly. I nodded. Exactly. The next days were a blur of preparation. Meeting with Richard. Reviewing the will. Making copies of the recordings. I wasn't rushing. No, this kind of revenge needed patience. Precision. Timing sharp enough to cut. And then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Amanda called. Her voice falsely sweet through the phone. Sarah. We should all get together. As a family. To talk about everything. I could hear the edge beneath her words. The greed. The desperation. They still thought my assets were theirs to divide. I smiled into the receiver, my heart steady as a war drum. Of course, I said. Let's talk. The meeting was at my mother's house. The same living room where birthday cakes had once been cut and family photos still lined the mantel. But when I stepped through the door, I didn't see warmth. I saw wolves dressed in familiar skins. Amanda sat cross-legged on the sofa, a stack of papers on the coffee table in front of her. My uncle leaned back in the armchair, hands clasped like a man playing chess. My mother stood near the window, wringing a tissue until it tore to shreds. Sarah, she breathed, her eyes wet, her voice trembling. We're so glad you're here. Her words might have fooled anyone else, but I had lain in a hospital bed listening to her voice drip venom. Now, all I heard was performance. I lowered myself into a chair, careful, steady. My body still felt fragile, but I wasn't here to show weakness. Amanda slid the stack of papers toward me. We thought it would be good to sort things out. Legally. I glanced at the top page. A power of attorney form. My name already filled in, waiting for my signature. My lips curved in a smile that wasn't a smile at all. You've been busy. It's just practical, Amanda said smoothly. You've been through a lot. You need someone to help manage your estate while you recover. My uncle chimed in, his voice low and coaxing. We only want what's best for you, Sarah. What's best for me? I wanted to laugh. What was best for me, according to them, was to be dead. I let a beat of silence stretch, long enough for their confidence to swell. Then, softly, I asked, was forging my signature on the withdrawal papers what's best for me too? The room froze. My mother's tissue slipped from her hand. Amanda's face went pale. My uncle's eyes darted to hers, then back to me. You don't know what you're talking about, Amanda said quickly. The doctors. I know exactly what I'm talking about. My voice was steady now, sharp enough to slice through their denials. I heard you. Every word. Every plan. And I'm not just talking about memory. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my bag and set the recorder on the coffee table. The little black device looked harmless, almost laughable. But the way Amanda's eyes widened told me she knew exactly what it was. My thumb hovered over the play button. Shall we listen together? My mother gasped, her face draining of color. Sarah, please. Amanda shot her a glare, the kind that silences weaker people. But I wasn't weak anymore. I pressed the button. Her own voice filled the room, cold and undeniable. We need to think about the estate. About splitting things before it gets messy. The words echoed, bouncing off the family photos on the walls. My uncle cursed under his breath. My mother sat down hard, as if her legs couldn't hold her anymore. And Amanda? Amanda went very still, her mask finally cracking. The room was silent when the recording ended, except for the faint hiss of static before I switched it off. I expected shouting, maybe excuses. What I didn't expect was Amanda's smile. It wasn't nervous. It wasn't ashamed. It was sharp, deliberate, like a blade pressed against skin. You think that little toy saves you? She asked, her voice calm, too calm. Sarah, you don't get it, do you? No one cares. Families fight over estates all the time. Judges see it every day. You think one scratchy recording makes you a saint and us the villains. Her eyes glittered as she leaned forward, folding her hands on the table like she was negotiating a business deal. You've been in a coma. You're weak. You're unstable. Half the town already thinks you're lucky to be alive at all. Do you really think anyone will believe you over us? The words were meant to pierce me, to reduce me back to the fragile body in the hospital bed. But instead, something inside me hardened. I tilted my head, letting silence answer her for a moment. Then I whispered, "I don't need them to believe me. I just need them to hear you." Amanda's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. But then she leaned back, crossing her legs casually, like she had all the time in the world. "You're not the only one who can record things, Sarah. Don't forget, I know your secrets too." The words hit harder than I wanted to admit. My chest tightened. My mind raced. What could she mean? My mother finally broke in, her voice trembling. "Amanda, stop. This isn't." Amanda cut her off without looking at her. "Don't pretend, Mom. You were part of it too." The air in the room shifted, suffocating, poisonous. My uncle stayed silent, but I could see the sweat beading on his forehead. He wasn't built for confrontation, only for quiet scheming. I steadied myself. My voice came out colder than I thought possible. "So what's this, Amanda? A threat?" Her smile widened. "Not a threat. A reminder. You're not untouchable. People slip. Stories twist. And sometimes accidents happen twice." The way she said it, so casual, so effortless, made my blood run cold. For a moment, I saw myself again in that hospital bed, machines hissing, my body unmoving, while she waited for silence to become permanent. But I wasn't in that bed anymore. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. "Try it. Just try. Because this time, Amanda, I'm not alone. And when I bring you down, I'll make sure you can't crawl back up again." Her smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes. Something nervous. Something that told me she hadn't expected me to bite back. For the first time, I saw her for what she truly was, not invincible. Just desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. The night after that meeting, I barely slept. Amanda's words looped in my head like poison. Accidents happen twice. But fear didn't paralyze me this time. It fueled me. By morning, the plan was already in motion. Richard had drafted the ironclad will months before the accident. Every detail was airtight, no loopholes, no gray areas. But now, I had something even stronger than paper: voices. Proof of their conspiracy, captured in their own words. I spent the next week building my case like a fortress. Copies of the recordings went into safe deposit boxes. Richard had his set. Michael had another. And I kept one more in my pocket, like a weapon I could draw at any moment. The final move came faster than my family expected. The court hearing was supposed to be a simple review of estate planning session, a quiet formality they thought they could manipulate. But when Amanda, my mother, and my uncle walked into that courtroom, dressed in their best masks of grief and concern, they didn't know I'd already beaten them there. When the judge called the session to order, Amanda launched into her performance, painting herself as the dutiful sister who only wanted to help poor, fragile Sarah recover. My mother dabbed fake tears with a tissue. My uncle nodded along, solemn as a priest. Then Richard rose. Calm, steady, unflinching. "Your Honor," he said, sliding a small recorder onto the desk. "Before we proceed, my client would like the court to hear something." Amanda's face drained of color before the first word even played. And then her voice filled the room, clear and damning. "We need to think about the estate. About splitting things before it gets messy." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. My mother's tissue fell to the floor. My uncle cursed under his breath. And Amanda? For the first time, she couldn't smile her way out of it. The judge's gavel cracked against the bench. Enough. By the time it was over, their scheme lay in ashes. The will stood unchallenged. Every attempt at forgery, every whisper of greed, they weren't just exposed, they were on record, permanent, undeniable. But it wasn't the legal victory that satisfied me most. It was the moment I walked past them, standing tall on legs that once couldn't move, breathing air they had prayed I'd never taste again. Amanda's eyes burned into mine as I passed. She still wanted to believe she had power over me. I leaned close enough for only her to hear. "You should have pulled the plug faster." Her face cracked, rage spilling through. And for the first time, I smiled. Because I wasn't just alive. I had won. And they would spend the rest of their lives choking on the fact that the sister, daughter, and niece they had written off had risen from the grave. Not as their victim, but as their ruin. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thank you.